think we're now learning that, in fact, the brain is changing all the time, that the brain is changing with everything we think, with everything we experience.
Bachirita thought that the brain could rewire itself by unmasking alternate pathways or sprouting new ones. What Cheryl's brain is doing is receiving the signals from her tongue and sending them to the part of her brainstem that normally processes touch. It's then that her brain redirects this information to the area that deals with balance by unmasking dormant pathways.
Cheryl was able to pick up that signal within a couple of minutes and learn how to move head left, right, front, back, and maintain upright posture, and we were amazed by that.
And when we realized that she's stabilizing her body, we decided to try remove the device from the mouse and see how long she can stay and keep the balance afterwards.
And that was the first residual, and it lasted about an hour, and it was an hour of total freedom.
Suddenly, there was a profound realization that these people don't have to use this device all the time. That there's something more than just sensory substitution. It's a neurorehabilitation. The brain is learning how to change itself by use of this device. That's the big breakthrough.
That soldier's lesion was caused by the shrapnel that had been lodged in the part of the brain that integrates signals from the occipital lobe, which processes vision, the temporal lobe, which processes sound and language, and the parietal lobe, which processes touch. So now she knew the junction or area of her brain that was underperforming. The problem was, Luria was never able to provide a treatment for the poor soldier he was treating.
Then I also came across a paper by neuroscientist Mark Rosenzweig out of Berkeley, and he was looking at neuroplasticity and that the brain wasn't fixed, that the brain actually could change, that through very specific stimulation and exercise, you could change the brain at a physiological level, which then allowed effective learning to go forward. It made me realize, you know what, I don't need to be stuck with this learning disability. I don't need to live the rest of my life with it. There's a possibility here that I may actually be able to do something about it and rewire my own brain.
Because she couldn't read clocks, what she did for her first exercise was very simple and elegant.
I took a number of flashcards, I made up a number of times, and I drew the clock faces.
And then she would add a minute hand and a second hand and a hand for the week and the month and the year. And a number of weeks into it, she started to notice some extraordinary changes.
It was incredible. It was like blinders came off. And then what's your next hand? 16. Okay.
Just by these incremental exercises, she was building up new connections in those processing areas so that they could start to function eventually at an average level and then at an above average level.
What I believe this work does through specific cognitive exercises is actually stimulate the function of the underlying brain area to change it, to rewire it, to strengthen it, to improve it, and they can walk out of this program and never have to look back.
One of the things that's so powerful about Fast for Word is that before the program, kids with reading difficulties have very unusual scans, very, very different from normal. But as they start to improve on the exercises and as they start to get better at reading, Merzenich was able to show that their brain scans also normalized.
The fish are swimming.
But Merzenich's scientific work is not just for children.
Ready? So this exercise is called Bird Safari.
He has been able to prove that plasticity exists from cradle to grave. And studies show that the elderly can use his brain fitness program to sharpen their memories and function as well as they did when they were from 10 to 25 years younger. The essence of the cure is this incremental training. Concentrated practice helps rewire the brain by triggering plastic changes. After there has been massive brain death, new neurons are recruited to take over lost functions.
3174, that's better. That's 7 seconds faster.
What we find after CI therapy is that the healthy part of the brain is recruited to produce movements of the affected arm.
Good.
And that is what we call neuroplasticity.
One of the things I became interested in is the question of how do the maps change when you simply think of things, when you don't do anything other than thinking. We took normal subjects and we set them in front of a piano and asked them to learn to do a 5-finger movement exercise. They just had to go from thumb to little finger, back to thumb, back to little finger at a given rate. And we found that over these 5 days of practice, the part of the brain that controls finger flexions got larger and larger and larger. But we had another group of subjects who simply sat in front of the piano and imagined themselves moving. And we made sure that they did not move, but simply mentally rehearsed the actions. What we found in them is that the brain changed in exactly the same way as in those that actually physically practice. So the idea is that just thinking will change your brain.
We've all heard the claim, right, that we only use 10% of our brain's power? Is it true? Nuh-uh.
In reality, even simple jobs make our brains very busy. As I read, the occipital lobe of my cerebral cortex helps me see the words, while my frontal lobes help me respond to what I'm reading. I'm enjoying these strawberries thanks to the parietal lobe that handles taste and texture, and my temporal lobe lets me hear my music.
So where'd that 10% number come from? Well, it probably stems from the fact that about 10% of our brain is gray matter, the neurons, the things that are doing the heavy lifting. The other 90% is white matter. That's there to support the gray matter. But here's the thing, gray matter, white matter, it doesn't matter because we use the whole thing.
Mike's stroke damaged his motor cortex, making it hard for his brain to send messages to his arm, hand, and fingers. When we play music, it activates the auditory cortex, the area right next door. Miriam wants to discover if this connection can be used to repair Mike's brain.
So I think that this concept of auditory motor coactivation is really interesting. Now what we're trying to discover is whether music therapy can activate the motor cortex of Mike's brain and create new connections and pathways and actually rehabilitate the damage done by the stroke.
For the next 3 weeks, Mike must play as often as possible.
It's just moving my fingers, but it's also following the beat, trying to follow a rhythm. It's a lot difficult than just taking an object and moving it from one place to another. Three.
And Mike's not alone. Miriam's findings are backed by studies in Germany and Spain. Before music therapy, there was very little activity in the motor cortex of participants who'd had a stroke. After therapy, activation in this area increased dramatically.
This is a typical brain at rest, showing little activity. As for Ethan, his brain is getting busy.
The brighter the color, the more activity that we're measuring. These kind of things are extremely typical of people who are being imaged under the influence of alcohol. how it starts with a thought that would actually brew and get some circuitry engaged and then would permeate all the way down your physiology. And that's the science of suggestion.
Suggestion, belief, expectation, complex ideas that influence our thoughts and how the brain processes them.
There's certain parts of your cortex, that thin layer that rides over your entire brain, that contains most of our higher brain functions. And this part of the brain has circuits, and these circuits can actually anticipate what the result is going to be.
Professor Ted Kapchuk oversees a team of researchers dedicated to unraveling the truth about what placebos can and cannot do.
Can't shrink a tumor, can't lower your cholesterol.
And they can't fix your broken bones either.
Most of the symptoms that placebos change are self-appraisal symptoms, subjective symptoms, depression, pain, nausea, anxiety, functional problems with the bowel, urinary.
Twice as many patients who received placebos reported significant symptom relief compared to those who didn't get any pills at all. Results that surprised scientists who had always looked at placebo effects with suspicion.
It's a potential game changer. It overthrew a belief that you have to lie and deceive people in order to have a placebo effect.